deal with physics. When we talk about a topic like dimensions of space, sometimes we just say, "Oh, okay, it's a math problem. There's nothing to do with physics because physics is another topic." But no, if there's a topic we should deal with physics, it is the dimensions of space. It's just like if in accounting you don't care about money. Okay, let's forget about money, just focus on digits, on the math. No, those digits are there to describe the real money, so you cannot forget money. Let's not forget physics in the dimensions. We need physics to describe a 3D object, for example. The fourth dimension is not time, but okay, a zero dimension universe is just a spot. If you want to look at the spot, it's the spot itself, you don't have any choice. We jump to dimension 1. The whole universe is a line. If you want to locate a spot, you just have to give the coordinate of the spot. We'll graduate the line and that's it. If you jump to the upper dimension, it's an area. If you want to locate a point, you have to give two coordinates, x and y. Okay, let's go to the third dimension. You have to give three coordinates, x, y, z, to locate a spot. To locate a spot in the fourth dimension now, you have to give four dimensions, x, y, z, and t. T means time. It's not really the time, actually. We'll see it further, but let's just call it time to simplify it. For example, if I want to come across to you, I will say, okay, let's meet at that avenue, at that address. Okay, the avenue is the x, the address is the y, and in such story, the story is the z. But if we want to come across, if we don't precise the time, the localization of the spot is not precise anymore. So I was saying that the fourth coordinate, the t, means time, but it's not really time. We just say time to make it simple, but it's many steps. Okay, when you locate an object and a precise time, the object has a color, has an age, has a density, has a precise temperature. So there's many features, several features, and those features are located in time, and those parameters are in time. And to simplify, we just say time. Points of view, where to be located to see anything globally. Okay, there's something funny and a little bit frustrating. When you're in a dimension, you cannot see that dimension. For example, in the one dimension world, the line, you cannot see the line actually. If you're a spot in this line, when you look at your left, you see a spot. When you look at your right, you still see a spot. You can have a global view of the line. To see the line, for example, to draw it on the piece of paper, you have to be in two dimensions because the paper is in two dimensions. So similarly, to see in 2D width and length, you cannot yourself be in two dimensions. To be aware of the area of the paper, you cannot live inside the paper itself. When you are in the paper, wherever you look, you see only a line, horizon. So to see everything that exists on the paper, you have to look at it from above. You have to be in three dimensions. Keep that way of thinking. If you want to see the third dimension completely, you have to be in fourth dimension. We are, because we have complete access to three dimensions. Creating a very complex volume, does it make you enter the fourth dimension? To go from one dimension to the upper dimension, you have to move to that dimension. The spot is zero dimension. To go to one dimension, move the spot outside from itself. it will draw a line. Then the line is 2 dimensions. To go to dimension 2, move the line perpendicularly to itself. It will broom, it will describe an area. Move it perpendicularly to itself, will describe a 3D volume. We just jump from 2D to 3D. So now, to jump from 3D to 4D, do we just have to move a volume? If I move a 3D volume from left to right like this, did I jump to 4th dimension? Do you think? I don't think so. I'm still in the 3rd dimension. Remember, we just said to jump from one dimension to another, we have to move the object outside from itself to go to the upper dimension. So how do we jump from 3D to 4D? That is where we need physics, because we know that matter is made from particles, made from subparticles, made from vibrations, energy, and according to their frequency and their amplitude, length, etc., they will create some type of subparticle. And those subparticles, according to their number, will create atoms, and atoms, according to their combination, they will create molecules, and that's what we call matter. In this example, what represents the motion to jump from one dimension to another is not just a simple translating motion. No, here this motion is those vibration waves, and those will make us jump from 3D to 4 dimensions. If we could say jump from a dead object to an existing object. Okay, and what's interesting here, we just say to go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, we have to move vertically a piece of paper to describe a volume. But think about this. If I move the paper very fast, I will describe a very light, low density volume like sponge or wood. But if I move the paper very slowly, I will describe a very heavy piece of matter, like metal for example. Okay, so how do we jump from 3D to 4D? We just say vibration. So when we have some kind of vibration, for example, a vibration according to its frequency, we'll have certain types of subparticles like quarks, gluon, etc., protons. What separates them is just the vibration frequency. Let's go to atom scale. We're not talking about vibration anymore, but motion, and atoms are bumping each other. It creates what we know as temperature. So you see, when you are in 4 dimensions, you cannot just describe an object from his length or width, but other features, mass, volume, temperature. So the world in which we are is not a 3D world, but at least 4D world, because I don't really know why. The further we go, the further we realize there are still things to discover. Can we represent a volume on a 3D piece of paper? We can represent a volume on a 2D piece of paper. But what about a 1-dimension thread? Can we represent a cube on a piece of paper? Of course, the cube is in 3D, the paper in 2D. However, we can still represent it, but not create, but we can represent it. Visually, you can trick your brain. It will interpret this drawing like a 3D shape, no problem. How comes it's possible now? Because there's only 1-dimension gap between 3D and 2D. Let's go to a 1-dimension universe, a line. Imagine I give you a pen and a thread, and I say, okay, draw a cube on this thread. You just can't. Why not? Because there's a 2-dimension gap between 3D cube and the 1D thread. So if you want to represent a 4-dimension object on a 3-dimension support, is also impossible. I mean, you cannot even come close to what it is supposed to look like. So a 2D. object, it's a piece of paper or a screen. It means that if you want to represent a 4 dimensions object, you have to be at least in 3 dimensions. And you don't draw it anymore, but you make a model of it because it's 3D representation. Don't make confusion between creating and just representing. Representing, making, and completely understanding. Okay, we are going further step by step in our comprehension. So we saw 3 steps. First step, representation of the object. Second step is creating, making the object. And third step, complete understanding, total experiencing. So 1, represent, 2, create, 3, global experiencing. First step, representing. We just said we can represent a cube on paper because the paper is 2D, the cube is 3D, and there is only a gap of 1 dimension between the two. So to represent, you have to respect this rule to be at -1 dimension. Step 2, create. If I want to create a box, I have to be at least at the same dimension, a box. Okay, though there's no gap, we have 0, same level. Step 3, global experiencing, understanding of the object. We saw that if I draw a square on paper, I can't see the square because I'm 1 dimension higher than the 2 dimension world of the paper. As long as I'm in 3 dimensions, I can see the square in its globality. I have the global understanding of the square. But if I was a 2D being living inside the flat paper, wherever I look, I only see lines. Okay? Take a piece of paper, place it in front of your eyes, but put the face such as the 2 faces look the sky and the floor. What do you see? You see only the width of a line. In my 2 dimensions universe, I can see squares, but I will only see lines, very confusing lines and spots, and I'm gonna ask myself, man, what is this supposed to represent? But I will never experience and understand, really see the square in its globality. Okay, so in the universe you cannot understand objects in their globality. You can represent them, make them, but you cannot understand them. You see them but not completely. Just like instead of seeing people, you only see shadows of people. Okay, if you look at shadow, you have information about the real person. That's true, but you just see a flat dark object, colorless, soundless, without any texture. Imagine you come from the shadow world and they show you the real world. You're gonna have a shock. You're going to understand, man, now I understand what the shadow was supposed to represent, the meaning of a shadow. Now I took example of the square, but let's now take example of a 3D world versus a 4D. What does it mean? In our world now, if I take a box in my hand, I can't see the box in any point of view. I can smell the box, I can feel it, and even if it was a big box, I can go inside and feel it from the inside. I have a global understanding of the box, and the box is in 3 dimensions. Think about it. It means that our world is not in 3 dimensions. I don't know, but it's at least in 4 dimensions. Support to draw or represent an environment to make exist or to create. So let's understand clearly what we're talking about here. Do not confuse the word of the object and the representation support of the object. If I take again the example of the square on the paper, its representation support is the paper and its word is also the paper, because the square is in 2D, just like the paper. Now, if I take the 3D and I represent a box on the paper, it's still possible. We saw that. The box, his representation support is the paper, but his environment word where it exists is not a piece of paper. So don't make confusion between support for representing and environment where the object really exists. Each dimension creates a new element. There is something else we have not to forget when we jump from one dimension to another. It's that it occurs creation of a new entity than the previous dimension does not know at all. So let's take again the one dimension world as example. It's the line. So to jump from one dimension to two dimensions, from line to square, you have to move the line perpendicularly to itself and it will describe an area. And in this 2D world, there's a new entity, that is the area. A square has line just like the one dimension, but the lines are in two dimensions now and they can describe an area. The area is a completely new entity created just by jumping from one dimension to two dimensions. And a being living in one dimension just can't understand what an area is. He has to experience it to understand it. So when you jump from two dimensions to three dimensions, there is also a new entity. There is a creation of volume. Similarly, when you jump from 3D to 4, you cannot just have complex volumes, okay? If you are in a 3D world and you think that to jump from that 3D world to the 4D world, you just have to move the volumes and have more complex volumes, you are wrong. You are still stuck in the third dimension. When you jump to the fourth dimension, you have to create something new. How do you call it? The super volume, the hyper volume? We don't know. Just something new. This can lead you to philosophy, metaphysics, religion. You're going to a higher level of thinking. Can we still talk about dimension where you are in the fourth? Now we know you have restriction. When you are in a world, you can completely understand the object you're living with in that world. You have to be in the superior dimension to understand the object. So the object of our world, we don't really experience them. Think about it. To experience the objects of our current world, we have to go to the upper dimension. So what about fourth dimension? Can I even say fourth dimension? Because it's a very controversial topic. Not everyone agrees about what is supposed to be. But dimensions 0, 1, 2, 3, no problem. We understand them, we master them, we can represent them, you can create objects of those dimensions. So let me ask you a question. Why it should have a fourth dimension? Okay, maybe there's something beyond, but why it should be named dimension anymore? Maybe the dimensions end at 3 and beyond you are going into something completely new. Okay, let's take an example in math, arithmetics precisely. We know integers units stop at the 9th unit. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 is the last unit. If I say 10th unit, technically I'm wrong. Because as soon as you're at 10, you are not in the unit anymore. The unit stops at 9. That's it. If you go beyond, you're entering a new system, the 10th. So similarly, with the dimensions, do we have any evidence that after the third dimension we can still talk about dimensions? Maybe we're going inside something completely new and something we don't know. Sometimes we have to accept to be ignorant of something because this is the first step to knowledge. We don't know anything about the world we are living in. What to say about upper dimension world? We just understood our ignorance. Very fascinating topics. Thank you for watching.